Hi, I am Anna, the head and face between the small indie sewing pattern label sew.lala Patterns. And first of all, I wanted to thank you for purchasing my sewing patterns and to support my small passion. And yeah, it's been a few months after I released the first sewing pattern, the KAYLI backpack, and I'm still a little overwhelmed and flashed by your excitement about it. I'm excited too, as you might think, but yeah. I also realized that there's one part in the instructional where some of you start to struggle, and so today this tutorial is about how to join together the single prepared surfaces so that you will have your own individual backpack in the end. So I will show you how to put together the outer fabric, how to sew the lining, and how to turn it so that you can close your turning opening and be done with your cut. Before we start all over, I quickly show you the prepared pieces so that you have an overview of what they should look like. So we have the lining front side, we have the lining back side with the zipper pouch. This is what it should look like. It should be moving freely, and with a big pocket to put in your notebook or whatever you desire. We have both of the bottom pieces, nothing happened so far with them, and we have the side panels with the zipper attached. So make sure that yours look like this and that you can move on with them separately, and that you have a clean sewing line and it's all closed up here. Also, we have the prepared outside front and back side. I always recommend to attach the straps with a pin here so that they don't get into your sewing and that you don't have to seam rip anywhere. We will start with the outside of the backpack, so you can put aside the lining pieces for now. We will start with attaching the bottom panel to the bottom side of your outer front, and I always feel it's helpful if you take your bottom piece and mark the first centimeter with a dot, because it says that you have to remain the first centimeter unsewn. This is important because otherwise you wouldn't be able to turn it inside out nicely. So just mark the first centimeter with a dot, and you have to sew between the dots then. I have already prepared the dot marks. I hope they are visible enough. Now you take pins and you pin, oh, what I forgot to say. For sure you have those notches on one side of the long sides of your bottom piece, and those should match perfectly on your webbing. So it should be in between those notches if you fold it up. Then you take pins and you just pin right on the dot mark on each side of the bottom edge. And for sure you can also fill in with more pins if you like to. And then you just sew in between those two outer pins with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Then you take your side panels attached with a zipper panel, and what's most importantly at this part is that you fold away the lining. You just need the outer fabric side panel to work with. You take your outer fabric side panel and put it on the bottom piece that has already been sewn to the front of your outer backpack, and then you try to really match the dot mark again. If it doesn't match, you just put a second pin, or if you're clever, just pin it from the back side. Same with the other, and try to be as exact as possible. Pin to the dot mark, and then you will sew in between the pins again with 1 centimeter of seam allowance. You do the same procedure for your other side of the side panel and bottom piece. Match the dot. Match the dot on the other side. And then do it properly, not like as I did. And then head over to your machine. After sewing, if you take a look at your sewn corners that you created, there should be no overlapping of seams, there should be no seam further inside the seam allowance or something. It should be really on point. This is really important. If you take a closer look at your sewing so far, it's pretty obvious what's the next step. You will sew the side panel to the outer front panel right along the side seam. And it's pretty simple because you have those layers separated here. The lining will not be sewn in. This is why it's important to do it like this, so you can sew them on separately. There's something to take care of here in this section, but I will show in a second. When you have pinned the side panel to the front outside of your backpack, you might realize that it's all a smooth ride until you come to the rounded corners. There it just looks weirdly. I already prepared one side to show you how we will solve this problem. You will do small notches like 0.5 centimeters into the side panel, importantly not to the front, so it's where it's a straight edge. And this will make it so much easier to do a to create a nice rounded corner here. This one is not done, so I will show you. Just clip in 0.5 centimeter. 3 times should be fine. And then it's way more easy to mold the rounded corner nicely. Don't forget to pin. And then we're off to the machine. You will sew the whole side with 1 centimeter seam allowance all around. Your backpack already starts to look a little bit like a backpack now. The first seams have been finished, and there's something really important. You have to open the zipper now, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to turn it inside out and do this thing to have your backpack with the lining inside and the outer fabric outside in the end. So don't forget, open the zipper now. The next step will be to attach the backpack outside back panel, which you have already prepared with the straps and everything. So you turn it right side down and start to pin it to the remaining unsewn edge of the bottom piece. Here, as well as with all the other pieces that you have sewn to the bottom piece, take care to stay with the sewing inside of the 1 centimeter from the edge. You now pin and sew with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Attaching the back to the side panel is basically the same procedure as with the front. You just pin all the way around the side. You match all notches on the way on the side, at the top, and then you again clip into the side panel at height of the rounded corner of your back panel. Then you sew with 1 centimeter seam allowance all around it, and then your outer backpack is already finished. This is what your backpack looks like now, with those flabby lining panels hanging around. But when you open it to the inside and have a look, the outside is already done, and I ask you to remove the pin if you have added one, because if you turn it around at the end, it might be it might hurt you, so it's better to remove it. To sew the lining, you turn the backpack inside out, so the outside is outside. Take a look, give yourself a clap, you did great. You might think it's a little bit weird because how do I continue with this, but you just put it aside and you take your lining front panel and your bottom panel. It's the same as when you started to sew the outside of your backpack. You take the front of your lining, you take the bottom piece of your lining, you put them right sides together. You also add the 1 centimeter dot marks, and it's really the same as you already did with the outside. You sew in between those lines, you pin exactly on those marks. And the seam allowance also is the same, it's 1 centimeter. Don't forget to have your turning opening, otherwise you won't be able to turn your backpack around. Fold down the bottom panel, and then you take your already turned around backpack with the outside facing you, and now the lining right side facing each other. You just lay it on the outside of your fabric, outside of your backpack, excuse me, and you just take the side panels. Be careful that they are not twisted, but they come straight, and you pin it on dot again, as we already did. Same procedure as with the outside of your backpack. Do the same for the other side as well, and then you sew with 1 centimeter seam allowance. It's the same procedure as with the outside of your backpack. You just put the lining front and the side panel together, you pin it tightly and match all notches, and don't forget to clip in the rounded corner section at the side panel, so that it will be a smooth ride for sewing. Then, for sure, it's the last piece that we have to add. We will add the back of your lining. You see, it's no problem, it's the same as you did with the outside of your backpack. You attach it at the bottom first, and then you sew all around at the sides. When you have attached the back of your lining, you put your backpack with the front facing up, and you just go through the turning opening and start to turn the backpack inside out. So last thing to finish is to close the turning opening. You just fold in 1 centimeter seam allowance and pin shut and tight. And then you will just sew with a really narrow to the edge stitch along. You can also close it with hand, but I always feel it's really deep down in your backpack and nobody will ever have a look if it's hand sewn or not. And with a machine it just gets so much quicker. So let's finish. So now the turning is closed. It's almost done. You just have to turn the lining inside of the fabric. And what I always do is when I've finished, I clip all threads that are loose or getting through the side seams, for example, and then you're finished.